safe space. We ain't never give a reason you should hide. Compile all your questions, we're taking the quest. Join Tarsha on this journey to discover the rest. Go.
Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I'm your host, Tarsha Smith, and thank you for joining us on yet another adventure. And today, family, the conversation is going to be very different. I have Sarah Murphy, who is the sister of Patrice Martin. Did I say her last name correct? Okay, that's what I thought. And she has already been on the show to tell her story. And if you haven't watched the episode, you got to go back to last week's episode. So today, we're going to put a little twist on the conversation because I know as an adoptee, myself and others out there, where we can get a little nervous about the family and finding our birth family and what that looks like. So Sarah is the birth sister of Patrice Martin. Hey, Sarah.
Yes. Hello.
Thank you so much for doing this and having this conversation.
Thanks
like
for
I was
having
telling,
me.
absolutely. Like I was telling you on offline, I understand everybody's story is different, but I just want to give a little bit of hope to some people that might be a little afraid to take this journey because you just, I guess it's a good and a bad statement. You just never know what's waiting for you, and you never know who might be looking for you. I think we forget that part. Somebody actually might be looking for you. So I want to start here. Growing up, I do understand that you knew about your sister.
Yes,
How old were? Go ahead. Yeah, how old were you when you found out?
I was actually a teenager, maybe about 14 or 15 years old. We had been in foster care for maybe about 8 years before then. And like when we came home, this is something that my mother decided to tell us. And I didn't believe her at first. I'm going to be honest. I didn't
Really?
because my mother suffered from, she had some mental health issues. And so, but then, the more I thought about it, I'm like, how could a woman make up a story like that and tell her kids, like sit down and tell her kids that? And I didn't, want to believe it because the circumstances are kind of extraordinary, but I, found out and I started looking
Okay.
as a
And
teenager.
I'm just trying to envision that in my head. You're about 14, 15. And how old it was your brother?
Yes. My brother, he had to be maybe about 10.
How do you set a 14 and 10-year-old down and say, okay? Because like you said, the circumstances were, whew, and say, I had a baby and I left them. What did she tell you? Did she
I
say that
think
she...
there were probably some things that led up to her even kind of being forced to tell us this story. Is that when we came back from foster care, at first we lived in an apartment, but then we moved into this house that belonged to my uncle.
Okay.
And we were in that house with her, and that's the house that she had the baby in.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so I think like just maybe being in that home might have like triggered her and forced her to tell
Yeah.
her story because she had opportunity before then, but we were a little younger. But I
Right.
think the timing of it had to do with being in that same space she was when she had the baby, when she had my
So,
sister.
okay. So did other family members know what she had done? Or do you know?
I want to say that she didn't tell anyone right away. No one even knew she was pregnant.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
she must have told an uncle and an aunt because after I found Patrice, I called some family members. I didn't really tell them what I knew because I still was in shock and still trying to find out, answers. But I asked an uncle and an aunt, they're a husband and wife, and they were the ones that actually lived in that house.
Okay.
So I think that she may have told them too, because she was living there or visiting them at the house, and it might have, you know, triggered her to tell her story. But they were the only people that knew the exact details of what she had done.
Oh my gosh. So you get this information as a teenager. How long does it take you to start looking? And when I say looking, what does that look like for a teenager or even when you hit your early 20s? Like what are you doing?
Well, I remember her saying that she saw a news article or saw her on the news after she was found, that she saw Patrice on the news after she was found. So I
Mhm.
kind of went to the library. Remember they had the old microfiche,
Yes.
and I
Mhm.
would go through looking for, trying to find a newspaper article or anything that would mention this baby that was left, behind a mall, and had no success. I looked for years and years. Then when the internet came on, I went there as a resource as well to start looking, but I still didn't find anything. And
Hmm.
so it's like for years I would, not constantly, like it would come in
Yeah. Come
phases
and
where I'm
go.
like, oh, let me see if I can find this, at least find a newspaper article and see, where I could go from there. But from like 14, 15 to whenever I found her, I would do that
Right.
periodically.
And it's something that just kind of stayed with you and then, just come and
Yeah.
go. And especially as technology came on the scene, you're like, okay, now I have more resources. Um, does the family know you're looking? Are you kind of doing this in
You
secret?
said that, do they know
Does the
Patrice?
family, yeah, do they know that you're looking for her or are you just doing this on your own?
I didn't really tell anyone. I actually, now that I think back on it, like I never even had a conversation with my brother about that after. I think because both of us were like somewhat in shock, and maybe he might have doubted, for a little while as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I never even talked to my brother to tell him that I was looking for her.
Oh, wow. Okay. And walk me through, and I'm trying to think back to Patrice's story. You took a DNA test,
Yes, I was
correct?
in the process of planning a family reunion.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, I got a test for me and my son. So I'm like, let's swab and see what else we can find out about the family before the reunion. And
Okay, stop.
so,
Hold on. I have a question. So when
mhm,
you took this DNA test, it wasn't so much to find her. It was let me just take this test and let's see what's out there. And
mhm, I was
I'm glad
looking,
you said that because a lot of people take tests just to either see their ethnicity or let me
and
just see what I can see.
that's what I was doing to
And
find, my
honey,
family.
sometimes we take these tests and things start coming. And look, Dana, as I call her, DNA starts telling on people.
Hmm. It's like I always say, it's like that story Pandora's box. Is that once you
Yeah,
take that test, is you have to, and I advise people that are talking about taking the test, that I tell them, like, just be prepared, because anything can
oh
come from these tests, and you'll
yeah,
find out your family secrets in a way that you might not be
that you
prepared
wasn't
for.
ready for. Yeah,
Hmm.
it might rock your world because
Hmm.
yeah.
So that's what
so
I'm
you
like.
so you take this test now. Originally, when you took this DNA test, what did you learn originally?
I took the test, and um, I don't know, I guess maybe because my son's younger, his strands of DNA are shorter. His test results came back first.
Okay.
And so they were both under my name, and it showed that I had two aunts, and like the people that that came through could have been my aunts.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I kept looking at the DNA, I'm like, wait a minute, um, this isn't my test, it's my son's test. But
Okay.
it's so ironic that how things happen is that um, my father hasn't ever really claimed me. And
Mm.
so the other aunt who I knew was my sister was the second aunt that came up on as a match round. And so once I saw like that much DNA would be
Yeah.
for an aunt, or because it gives you like options, it could be your
Right.
aunt, cousin, something like
Right.
that. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
specifically say this is your aunt. So you have to kind of, do some research to find out
Right.
who
Do
the
the process
relations
of
are.
elimination.
And so I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, two aunts, like who are these? And then it still didn't like dawn on me until it just like a light bulb went off. Like, wait a minute, this other aunt is my sister. And
Because you had to share at least 25%
hmm
DNA with her, somewhere in that range. Yeah, that's a lot of
hmm
DNA. That's a
so
lot of
that's what I
DNA.
figured.
Yeah.
Like the one that I knew was my sister, and then they shared the same amount of DNA with this other, relative. And so I was like, these are both your aunts. And I think I had to sit with it for a while. But then I
Mm.
told my son, like he was the only person that I told, like,
Uh-huh.
hey, I think I found your aunt. And my son, he's, young and still, not fully understanding everything that's going on. And so I reached out to the person who I thought was Patrice on
Mm-hmm.
Ancestry Messenger. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I think you're my sister. And then the person replied back like, well, why do you think that? And I'm like, because, we're a match on here. And then it maybe took them a few messages back and forth to try to find out who I was.
Right.
And so when I explained why, they asked me, why do you think that, this is your sister? And I explained the story that my mother told me. And then they were like, we, we know who your sister is. So, and I was just
Mm.
shocked, like, well, why does someone else, is,
Have her. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'll tell, for the family, what was going on is Patrice had taken a DNA test, but she had a company that was handling everything. So when you reached
Mhm.
out, you were speaking to the company and not actually Patrice, which you would have no way of knowing that. I know you
Well,
were like, what
actually,
is
it was,
happening?
I don't know if she told you, like, we were actually on a show,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
was that
And it was
show, like,
them.
their researchers were the
Right.
ones that had, and so they were like, wow, you found us instead of us, you know, finding you.
Right.
That's pretty
So
amazing.
for the person that's on the other side, and this is all I've always been curious about this, what I know what it feels like as an adoptee to find, but for you on the other side, what's that like? What does that feel like?
I think for a while I was in shock, but then I'm like, I was like so relieved because
Mm-hmm.
our mother at the time, she was very ill and I knew she didn't
Mm-hmm.
have much longer to live. So I just felt like that it was divine timing and so many
Mm,
things, the stars aligning, like so many like emotions that I went through, but it was more like a relief because when you're searching for someone for that long
mm-hmm.
and you don't find a clue or anything, and then one day you get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow,
Right, right.
and it was a feeling that I really can't even put into words.
Mm. And I'm glad to hear you say that because, again, sometimes adoptees forget somebody might be looking for you. And it's not always like a bad thing. Like my personal story, at this point, I have found both sides, and both sides have been receptive. Now, again, I understand everybody's story is different, but I think it's important that people do these kinds of things. I think it's important that we know who we are. We deserve to know who we are. And for the family to, to know. Now I want to ask you about your brother. At what point do you tell your brother, hey, I found her?
Well, it was, I think I called him and told him immediately, but
Mm,
I'll go back to that divine timing.
okay.
Um, it was ironic I had an aunt, Patricia, that passed away on June 29th. And so
Mm.
June 30th, I get these test results.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's like we had just lost a family member, and I knew like everyone was still going through the emotions of,
Yeah.
losing that aunt, and so like I called him like, hey, I don't even really know how to tell you this, but I think I found Patrice, or I didn't know what her name is. We had called her Angel.
Okay.
And so I guess like, someone when they found her in the newspaper, that's what they put as her caption for the name was Angel. So we had
Yeah,
been
because she
caught.
survived something that she probably should not have. Yeah, I get that.
Hmm. So they had been calling her Angel, and it's so crazy because there was when I used to live in a certain part, a certain neighborhood, people would come up to me calling me Angel, saying that I, look like,
Hmm.
because one day I stopped the person like, well, who do you think I am? And when they're like, I think you're Angel, or, a woman named Angel, which like, that wasn't my name, but it
No.
made me think like, oh, what if my sister looks that much alike? That this is my sister Angel. And let me tell you, I probably stalked this Angel person that I still haven't actually met this person, but I'm
Right.
sending messages to people who ran up to me thinking I was Angel. Well, give
Right.
Angel my phone number, and then come and find out her name wasn't Angel. It's just been so many.
Yeah, that's what you do when you're looking for people. You just start
Hmm.
digging, and the only way you're gonna hit that pot of gold, as you call it, is you gotta dig. So, at what point do you tell your mom?
My
And I
mom,
know she's very sick at this
she was
point.
very sick. I honestly, I couldn't even tell her her sister had passed away. She was so out of it. And
Mm.
I didn't even think that she would actually live to meet Patrice at all. So it was maybe even 2 months or longer
Oh,
after
you
I
didn't
found
tell her right
Patrice that she
away.
was cognizant enough to understand me telling her. And she just like kept saying, they found my daughter. They found my daughter. They found my
Oh,
daughter.
wow.
Like anyone that would come, she was in a nursing home at the time.
Mhm.
And like anyone that would come near her room, or she was, so happy. But it was just like strange that um I couldn't tell everyone because of the show. So
Okay.
there was a lot of my family members, I didn't tell them at all because I didn't want, to mess up, because I knew my sister had gone to that show, and
Mhm.
I didn't want to mess up, anything that they had planned. So I really couldn't tell that many people. And I remember telling my best friend, and once I finally got in touch with, the people from the show, and they wanted to involve my mom, but because she was so sick, she couldn't even swab. We couldn't even get a DNA sample from her.
Wow.
And so it definitely took a while for me to be able to tell her, but it was like the longest couple months ever, I think.
Oh, I can imagine. Oh my gosh, I can imagine. Okay, so you go through all this, and I know, because I saw the episode, and I was on pins and needles when you walked through the door to meet her. Like, my heart was like, talk about what that felt like for you as the as the birth family meeting the person that was adopted. What was, and I loved how you acted, but go ahead. Tell me, what was
I
that for
think
you?
that part of me, I, I was still in shock that even though I got
Mm.
this confirmation that, you know, that like I think like one time they were talking and they accidentally leaked her name out, and I'm like, is that her name? Is that her name? So I did know her name, before, but like when I
Oh, wait,
saw
hold
her,
on. So you knew nothing.
nothing
Like,
about her, nothing. Because what they did
oh.
was once they finally asked me, well, hey, have you ever heard of this show? And I'm like, I haven't. And so I went to Google, did my Googles, and I found episodes, but didn't realize it was actually filmed here too. So all the episodes that I saw were the UK version. I'm like, oh my God, my sister's in the UK. And it was like so
Oh.
many, so many things going through my mind. And then, someone sent me a clip from the US version. And I was like,
Okay.
okay, that makes sense. But it was
That would
like,
have been pretty cool though.
I know, I was like, we're going to drink tea together and everything, but they didn't tell me anything. So I didn't have any information other than, yes, we found your sister and we know who
Uh-huh.
your sister is because she's looking for you as well. And it was just that first meeting her. If I showed you a picture of my mother, you will also understand the shock.
Mm.
They look like twins.
Oh,
Like everything about her mannerisms, and then she
yeah.
also looked like cousins, and it was just like I can instantly see this, genetic resemblance
Yeah.
of everyone in the family, myself included. And I think that was the oddest like part to me. I don't know. I had one child, and when I looked at him the first time, I couldn't see myself ever doing what my mother did. And so
Mm.
and then when I look at her and I'm like, did she look like our mother that moment she was born? And, so many emotions just went through my head when I saw my sister for the first time. And I think that I could, tell that she was kind of apprehensive because she didn't, uh, know what her circumstances were. And I guess I should go back again is that, even before I found my sister, I found her sisters, her siblings,
Oh.
because my brother and her have the same dad. I have a different dad. So
Oh.
I looked for their dad for my brother, and I, located a sister. I actually called her and talked to her on the phone, and I
Mm-hmm.
told her like, hey, um, I'm the sibling of your siblings, and I just wanted to reach out to let you know that there also might be another sibling out there. And I think she probably thought I was crazy. Well, I know she did because we spoke about it recently, and so the older sister thought like, wait a minute, this woman's calling me talking about I have these siblings. And so I found, that information out before, and I
Mm-hmm.
shared it with my brother, but he never reached out to the other sister. And so when I found Patrice, I, also let her know like, hey, I have information about your father and you also have other siblings too. And,
That's
so I was
that's a lot.
definitely, it's been
That's a
an
lot.
amazing experience because I think that it showed me that, I mean, like if you keep doing something and don't give up hope, that, I'm not saying in every situation, but in most situations, you'll find the answers that you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And, and sometimes it may not be how you want those answers to come, because when I found her dad, he was already passed away.
Mm.
So when I took my brother the information, I don't think he was gone for a year yet, but I had to break it to my brother like, hey, you know, your dad has passed
Yeah.
away. And I also had to tell my sister that as well, that her father had passed away. But hey, I did find some other siblings too.
Right. You still have
And I
siblings
think
and
that just her even being the middle child was probably kind of rough to know because she was born after me, maybe 3 years. I might have been like 3 years old when she was born, but then we have a younger brother. So I'm sure that being in that space to know like you're the middle child and your mother did this to you, but kept, your
mm-hmm.
younger
And
brother.
she and I shared that in common because on my maternal side, I'm the middle child as well. and I have an older brother that's 2 years older, and then we have a younger brother. And she
Okay.
kept them. I was the one that was given up for adoption, so we shared that. And yeah, so I resonate with her. What that might feel like, oh, okay, I was the one that was given up, but because I've met them and everything, no one has ever sat me down and told me why, but I can kind of piece together my own narrative just based
Hmm.
on what the circumstance, like what I know. And so I get that. Let me tell you what I love so much when I watched the show. You were, I could tell you were nervous, but you were so open just out the gate as soon as the door opened. And then you had your purse and you said, this is what brought tears to my eyes. I've missed some birthdays. So here's this, here's that. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Because it's, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my brother, but I think every girl always wants a sister.
Yeah.
And, so I've had foster sisters, but, um, once I found out, like, I had a biological sister, I mean,
It's
not that I
it
don't
hits
have other
different.
biological sister, but through my mom, that it was just something that I
It
felt
hits
like
different.
I had to
Mm-hmm.
meet this person. And I even told her in the beginning, like, I can understand if you don't want to have anything else to do with us after finding this out. But like deep down inside, I'm like, I hope she doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You all yeah. I get it. I get it. Because on both sides, you're like, for us as an adoptee, we're like, I hope they accept me. But then what I always say is you kind of just gotta let the chips fall where they may and let those relationships
Hmm.
blossom however they're going to. And, you know, but for the two of you, for your you and your sister, it's been good, yes?
Yes, it's been, um, like I said, it's something that you really can't put into words. It's,
Mm,
a feeling that just knowing that like all those years of hard work, I actually found this person and I can talk to her every day and we could text and,
mm-hmm.
um, I remember just she, I want to say it was the year that I found her in 2019. I surprised her for her birthday. I, drove to Jersey. I took my son and, my nephew because I wanted them and an aunt because I wanted them to be able to meet her. And
Oh.
I guess it was sitting in some of those adoption groups that I realized like I know it's probably just already a lot that I need to give her time to just process and not just, be all over her. But like I really wanted to stalk her.
And usually it's the other way around because as adoptees, when we find you all, we're the ones coming with all the energy. And like, oh, I might need
Hmm.
to back up a little bit. I might need to. So it's really cool to hear you say that you had the same kind of energy,
Hmm.
which is not, I don't think that's a bad thing. But I guess, maybe it just depends on the person and how they want to take it because it can be a lot. Because when
Yeah,
you,
because it's something I did realize just emotionally that, once you peel off that band-aid and see like, oh, this is, what's going on. This is what my circumstances are because she never really knew. I mean, her adoptive mom, I think, found the article or had the article
mm-hmm,
from the newspaper. And so she kind of knew what happened to her, but like to actually get that story from person who did it, I think too, I'm glad that, the universe would have it that God, universe, like I said, all the stars were aligned, that my mother was cognizant and came to. She had been out of it where I thought that she wouldn't even make it to meet Patrice, but she was actually able to have a conversation with her before she passed. And I
that's
think that,
amazing.
a part of me when I found her initially, I felt bad about not finding her sooner, or but then I thought like God's timing was for it to happen
Everything.
then. And there was
Mm-hmm.
nothing that I could do but,
Mm-mm.
go along with the plan. And like, I felt a lot better when I looked at it that way, that it
For
wasn't
sure.
necessarily my doing, my, you know, thing to feel bad about, because I was doing exactly how, what I should have done. And
Mm-hmm.
she was able to have that conversation. We, exchange information, and it just goes to show you how small the world is. Like, we had people in common that we knew. We went to the same college. Like, I was a
Yeah, she
year
told me that.
before, but I was
Yeah.
injured and didn't finish. But had I finished, I
Yes.
might have bumped into her. So there were so many things that it just wasn't meant to be
It
until
wasn't
it was meant to
time.
be.
It wasn't time. Yeah. Everything in God's timing for sure. Um, so what I want to do, I'm gonna wrap up here, but I want you, if you had anything to say to um adoptees that are thinking about looking for their birth families, what would you say to them as a person that is a part of the birth family?
I would say don't give up hope. And then, even if things don't turn out exactly how you expect them to, is have an open mind. And also, don't blame yourself, because some things are, just how they are. And I'm always believed that what's supposed to happen will happen. And sometimes, and I found this even in my own life, that um, we have family that we're related to, but we also have the people that claim us no matter what. And those are also our family. And even
Mm-hmm.
though they might not be, or because even in families that you grow up with, you don't always have the relationships that you think you're going to have. That
Yeah.
I, told you the story about my sister. We don't talk at all. She doesn't claim me, and we know that we're siblings. We actually went to the same school together, grew up together. So that isn't something that I blame myself for at all, because I've done everything that I could do in my power. And it just isn't, a relationship that I can say that it's how I want it to be, because I would
Mm-hmm.
want us to have a relationship, but it's just not how things worked out. And that I don't blame myself at all for that situation. So I think
Mm-mm.
that as adoptees, you can't be hard on yourself because of, someone else's reaction, but never give up hope, and have an open mind. And also, time. Sometimes you can meet someone and it's just not the right time for that relationship that we want, but give people space and grace to be able
Mm.
to, come through. Because my brother, he somewhat has a relationship with Patrice, but he's still trying to wrap his mind around this whole dynamic of not being, just having one sister. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I found Patrice in 2019, slowly but surely working his way around to having that type of relationship. But it definitely wasn't something like, we didn't have the same, reaction or result. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, that there's, so many different ways things could go. But even just knowing and being able to see the face of a person is
Mm-hmm.
valuable to me, because
I
like I
agree.
said, if Patrice didn't want to have a relationship with me outside of that, being able to see her and have that conversation was huge for me.
Mm-hmm. And what I love about all of that is that as a birth sister, it meant something for you. And I think as adoptees, we don't get to hear that perspective that often. So I so appreciate you coming on the show and giving another perspective. And like I said in the beginning, giving hope. And I totally agree. Anybody that's thinking about doing this, don't be scared. Do it. Just be ready, like I always say.
Hmm.
And so I want to thank you so much, Sarah, for being. You're welcome. Trust me when I tell you what you did today is invaluable. I promise you it is. So until next week, bye, family.
Journey on. You need a pie with the good? Oh yeah, what's the one?